The Austrians, under the Habsburgs, are going to have various troubles dealing with especially religious issues during the time of the Protestant Reformation. And it's going to culminate in the Bohemian lands at the beginning of the 30 Years' War. 30 Years' War is from 1618 to 1648, and this is previous to the Siege of Vienna. And the war begins actually in the Bohemian area of Prague, an event called the Defenestration of Prague. There's a very famous, important person who's thrown out this window in Prague, and thus begins this religious conflict. And what the 30 Years' War was really about was determining which religion would be in which area. In the German states, there's the Protestant Revolution begins in the north, in the northern German states, which Austria had much control over for a long time. The Austrian crown, or the Habsburgs, were considered the Holy Roman Emperors, which was kind of this loose confederation of the German states. And the Habsburgs felt that they should be the leading force in the region, and their king should be the leading power. And hopefully maybe one day uniting some of these German states. This is not going to come to fruition. The Habsburgs will never fully be able to unite the German states, and at the end of the 30 Years' War, they do regain dominance in the Bohemian lands, and the nobles there are virtually wiped out under the war. And the 30 Years' War is a devastating war to Europe, and the amount of dead in the German states was probably the worst tragedy seen on the European peninsula for a very long time, and just devastated many communities. The Bohemians are going to lose control of their own region to be underneath the Habsburgs from that time period. Protestantism is going to try to make its push, however, and as I said earlier, the Calvinists are going to have their greatest achievements in some of these regions, especially in the what was of that divided Hungary, that three-part region in the Transylvania area, where I said there was more religious freedom. And so there's this struggle going on in this area again, this time not against Orthodoxy, not against the Muslims, but against a Protestant movement, against Catholicism in the region. From this point on, however, generally this is still a Catholic area, although there's these little strongholds of and diversity of religion. It's not going to be the major influence of the area. And this is how Central Europeans often discuss themselves as being Western Europeans. They're part of the West because they maintain Catholicism, or even Protestantism is still seen as being Western and not Orthodoxy. The Austrian Empire, as I said, in 1699, as the Treaty of Karlowitz, becomes dominant in the region. Not only do they gain some of this Ottoman territory, but they start to make other inroads, and in the late 18th century, with the division of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, they're going to get the city of Krakow under their control, and the area of the Galician provinces, which is parts of northern Slovakia and southwestern Ukraine, that subcarpathian basin region, which was basically a Polish-Ukrainian Catholic region, which again is going to be important to the Habsburg monarchy to maintain their peoples under Catholic control if possible. And those partitions happened in the late 1770s. In the 19th century, the the Habsburgs are going to face the rise of nationalism, and we've talked about this in many other areas. But once again, local peoples are are championed into believing that they are separate and different from their neighbors. Where does this force come from? It comes from above. Again, it comes from the noble class is pushing this, is going to identify who's who in this region. The people are local people. We're from the area. There's different languages being spoken, and that's very, typical to the region. In Hungary, it's going to be led by Count Széchenyi, and Count Széchenyi is going to look to the Hungarian peasant, and this is what becomes popular. The Hungarian peasant is going to represent this ideal vision of Hungarianness, and they're going to look at their local dress and their local costumes and dances and such, and try to find a definition as to what it means to be Hungarian, and how that's different from being a Slovak, and how that's different from being a Jew, and how that's different from being a Romanian. And they're going to have fancy dances, and where these very rich women who dress in Parisian gowns usually are going to have these costume balls where they dress as the peasants do, but in much fancier fabrics and such. And when we think of what is the national costume of Hungary or Poland or such, comes from this national movement. And where do these dances, or these national dances come? Again, 19th century, they're just trying to mimic what's happening there. Are they part of that culture? Not at all. Many of these people, as I said, were followed the fashion of Paris, and were urban and cosmopolitan, some of the leading forces here. Or they were wealthy gentry landowners, or they're just large landowners, not very wealthy at all. But it's from the noble class, not from the peasants. The peasants have no idea generally what's going on. And in many of these regions are still under serfdom, and that's not going to fully be out of the region until the 1850s or so. And the rise of nationalism is going to provoke revolution in the area in 1848, and this is the major date to Central Europe of when you see the first national groups fighting against the Habsburgs. So in Hungary, it's going to happen in March. There's also going to happen even in Vienna itself. We're going to have fighting against the crown, and the crown's going to have to flee, but they will eventually regain Vienna. And the Hungarians are going to be under a man named Louis Kossuth, and Kossuth is going to champion American-style democracy in many ways, but he's not going to champion other nationalities within the area, and that's probably going to be his flaw, because there are going to be times when, for example, the Serbs are willing to fight with the Hungarians with a promise that they'd get language rights and educational rights, but Kossuth is going to deny the minority populations again and again, and champion that we can only be Hungarian, and we can only be a Hungarian nation by eliminating and diminishing the influence of other, especially Slavic-speaking peoples. The revolution is going to be defeated by the Russians in 1849. The Russians are going to come, the Russian Empire will come in and stamp out the revolutions of this area, and that's going to hearken. People are going to remember this again when the Soviets take control in the 1940s, that it's again that Soviet or Russian power is invading the region. The national movements, though, are just going to lay dormant for a number of years to rise again in the 1860s, which we'll discuss.